Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. More than a decade ago, Bill and Melinda Gates and legendary investor Warren Buffett started something called the Giving Pledge. They were asking those worth more than $1 billion to donate more than half their wealth, preferably before they die. Around 200 billionaires have so far answered the call, and Warren Buffett himself has declared he'll give away 99% of his fortune. Buffett has already donated more than $37 billion in the last 15 years, and since its inception, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has seen almost $55 billion donated to causes ranging from vaccination to education. The numbers are staggering, but it's highlighted a major difference between the United States and Australia. In the US, philanthropy has been normalised, almost expected. And certainly in Australia, there have been some incredible instances of generosity. For example, businessman Paul Ramsey, who left his $4 billion fortune to his foundation when he died. But it's hard to argue with the fact that we just don't have the same culture of philanthropy as the US. Daniel Petre AO is a co-founder and chairman of venture capital group Airtree Ventures. In a recent article for the Australian Financial Review, Daniel wrote about why it's time for an overhaul of philanthropy in this country. Daniel, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thanks, Sean. Glad to be here.
So why is it Australia doesn't have that philanthropic sense that the US does?
Well, I mean, in reality, the US philanthropic sort of virtual cycle came out of two things. One was this sort of religious tithing that had a foothold in America, but also estate taxes. And there was this sense that why die with a bunch of money and that gets taxed at that point in time by the government? Why not set up giving ahead of dying and give some away and therefore see the benefits of being philanthropic in your normal life? So really it's kind of a cultural thing through tithing in the religious context, but then it was a structural reform in the sense of estate taxes that now created this sort of virtuous cycle, which is, and if you're in America, and I obviously worked in America for a number of years, and you go to a dinner party with wealthy people, 90% of the conversation is about the philanthropic efforts that they pursue. And quite honestly, in the US, if you are wealthy and you don't give, you're seen as a social pariah.
So why do you think the wealthy should donate?
Look, to me, you arrive at this one of two ways. So Bill Gates' mum spoke to him at length about this concept of if you're successful in life, it's your responsibility to give. That we are all lucky in our lives, and those of us who are born with IQ that comes from our parents and grandparents that live in countries that are free of violence, that go to good schools, that have good healthcare systems, and maybe have capital markets allow us to fund our businesses. You know, we're lucky. We haven't just got successful by our pure own effort. We're standing on the shoulders of others, be it genetics or be it schooling or be it health systems that allowed us to succeed. So the concept then of, well, you have a responsibility now to give back. And that's what drove Bill, was a sense of responsibility. The Warren Buffett, which is a sort of a different take on the same concept, is the lucky gene pool, which is he or I or you could have just as easily been born to parents of low IQ in dirt poor parts of Africa, and our chance of success is very, very low. It would not be just a function of hard work. That would be an insult to suggest that anyone in the world has the same opportunity to be successful. So you can come at it from either you just feel a responsibility because you've done well in a society that's allowed you to be successful, or you come at it from the lucky gene pool, or you come at it from just seeing heartache. Yeah. You don't need to look very far outside your own front door to see someone who's doing it tough for no reason. They haven't brought this upon themselves. And I feel you can't walk past these people or these causes every day without trying to do something.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it seems very arbitrary, the people who were fortunate and the people who are unfortunate. I'm in the middle somewhere, and I think that's probably the perfect place to be, and that means I'm incredibly lucky. But it is amazing how arbitrary sometimes people's positions in life end up.
Yeah, it's true. And I think we all admit ourselves, so much of our success in life is luck. I mean, I happen to be reasonably good at technology, but if I was born 1,000 years ago, I would have been some lion's meal on the savannah, right? You know, there wasn't much sort of scope for coding skills in the savannah 1,000 years ago. I'm just kind of lucky I arrived at a certain time. But I guess the thing I struggle with, and we come back to the point about that all the data shows, we should be very clear, all the data shows that Australia is not a philanthropic country.
Yeah.
Whether you look at giving as a percentage of GDP, just overall giving, whether you look at high net worth giving as a percentage of GDP, whichever way you cut it, the data shows very clearly that Australians are not very philanthropic and not very giving. So we don't need to have the discussion about the data. It's very clear.
Yeah.
It comes down to, well, why? And I guess that's the thing I struggle with is, in particular, if you've been financially lucky, you've ended up with more in your pile than somebody else. I just genuinely don't understand how you can sit there comfortably, see suffering in the world, and not find something, some cause that you feel you can maybe attend to and help alleviate suffering. And then, I must say also, we've been doing this, my family, for quite a long time now. I've been giving reasonable chunks of money. And the sheer joy you feel and sense of fulfillment when you see that you've impacted someone's life, there aren't words that can adequately describe how good it makes you feel to have done something that has really impacted someone's life. It's outside of the normal, you gave someone a job in your company kind of thing.
Stay with me, Daniel. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Daniel Petre, AO, co-founder and chair of Airtree Ventures. Is there a sense in Australia that, I used to run the BRW Rich List.
Yes, I remember.
And we tried to do a philanthropic list, and Dick Smith was pushing it because he's always been a great philanthropist himself.
Yes.
But what we kept running up against, and I remember this kind of email exchange with James Packer. James Packer gives away a lot of money, or he did certainly give away a huge amount of money. He didn't want people to know about it. And I think there were quite a few rich listers, to be honest, who actually gave away a lot of money, but it's almost like a tall poppy syndrome thing or something.
Well, firstly, I think we need to unpack the data. Firstly, so the Packers haven't given a lot of money away.
Right.
I think it depends what you call a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you look at the sort of general maths around philanthropy, which is, if someone allocated 20% of their wealth to a philanthropic fund and that gave away the required 5%, it effectively means they're giving around 1% of their wealth per year away, okay?
Yeah.
Now, most of my net wealth is growing at somewhere between 7 to 12% per year, compound. So giving away 1% is not going to get you any trouble anytime soon. There's no way that they were giving 1% of their worth per year. So I think what you see is this massive smoke screen, which is people fall into that trap, quite frankly, which is they're told that people are giving away enormous amounts of money but don't want to be recognized. It's just not true. It's just simply not true, because if it was true, the numbers would appear. They'd appear in Philanthropy Australia's analysis. They would appear in the donations of major charities. So the fact that someone could be secretly giving 20, 30, 40, $50 million a year and it not appear somewhere is just kind of nonsensical.
Yep.
And so what actually happens is a lot of wealthy families give very little away, but either make a sort of offhand comment, we give a lot, but we don't want to talk about it, which is a smokescreen to not giving very much. Or they set up a foundation with a tiny amount in it. And I've seen this happen. I've seen families with $300, $400, $500 million set up a PAF, a private ancillary fund, with $2 million in it, which gives away $100,000 a year. And the family talks about all the work they're doing in Indigenous education, all the work they're doing in remote nursing. And you know them, you know how much money they've got, and you're assuming they're giving away truckloads. And in fact, they're just trying to set the dogs off the scent by having this fake structure. So no, it is not true that there are legions of super wealthy Australians who are giving tens of millions of dollars away and it's all been done secretly. It's just not true.
So how do we get them to do it? Talk about it more?
Yeah, well, I think we've got to confront, I have discussions with friends of mine in the space and they say, no, we've got to do all the carrots. We can't upset people. And so I think we've done a lot of carrot work, which is creating the tax structures that make it very easy to give. The public ancillary funds and the private ancillary funds, the PAFs, is a super easy way to get tax-effective treatment of asset allocations to philanthropy. You get tax deductions. It's all very easy, all very simple. You can move assets, you can move cash, you can move whatever you want. So I think we've probably done enough on the carrots, make it easy. Then I think the other two tacks or approaches are, one, this whole sense of fairness. Do you really think it is fair and right that all this money has appeared in your bank account and that you have no responsibility to give? Now, I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have and try and unpack with people and take them down. And we might touch on these, some of the comments they make about why they don't give. But frankly, we also need, which exists in all other OECD countries, is an inheritance tax. And basically it says, look, if you're not going to give a reasonable chunk away through your life, for someone who's got more than $20 million in assets, we're not talking about Mrs. Smith in Geelong or Campbelltown with a home worth 400 or 500 grand. We're talking about someone with $20 million. If you're not going to give away some during your life, then when you die, we're going to take 20% of that, and that's going to be an inheritance tax that goes to charities through some charity fund. And remembering that the UK has an inheritance tax that cuts in at £400,000. It's 40%. The US has an inheritance tax that cuts in at $5.25 million. All the major OECD countries have some form of inheritance tax, which is either a catch-all for those that are greedy and don't want to give, or a motivator, as it was in the US, to help people say, well, I might as well give some away before I die.
Yeah, okay. Do you think the government will do it?
Look, no, because the governments don't want to be seen to increasing taxes, particularly on wealthy and influential people who can take full-page ads out in the papers and say how outrageous it is. So this requires bipartisan conscience vote. You talk to anyone on the street and you do the numbers at my article, or I've done a Medium post, which is a longer version, and you look at the numbers, someone with $400 million, and you're saying, hey, why don't you just take 20%, $80 million, put it in a foundation, and it donates to whatever you care about. No government has a say about that. You're left to live on $320 million. Is it true to say that someone with $400 million can just as easily live their complete same lifestyle and do whatever they want on 320? Of course they can.
Yep.
And that can be set at 300, 500, 200, 100, and probably even at 50 or 60 or 40 million. Can someone who's got $40 million move $8 million into a foundation and live just as happily on 32 million? Of course they can. So I think it's that discussion that we have to have with governments to say, well, let's put an inheritance tax in that cuts in at a high net wealth and has a low tax rate, so 20 or 30%, as a motivator to get people to think, and let's call out the wealthy. I remember when you tried to do this at BRW, you might not remember, I was a huge supporter of the idea of, let's have the rich 200, and the next column, how much they're donating.
Yes, I do remember that. Yep.
And then if you're worth 500, you give nothing away, then put your hand up and say, look, I'm a greedy bastard, I don't care. That's fine. It's fine to have that view, but don't pretend you care. Don't pretend you have any sense of responsibility to the society from which you grew your fortune, because you don't.
Okay, the other side of it is, do charities use the money well?
Well, this is one of the good points. One of the great sort of comebacks is, well, I'd love to give charities, but they're inefficient. Well, there's two answers to that. Well, firstly, there are some that are efficient. Pick one of the efficient ones and back them. Or two, why don't you start a charity that's more efficient, or put your intellectual processes into the charity as well as money to help make them more efficient? Or three, there are groups like givewell.org whose job it is to search out the most effective or efficient charities within particular need areas. And they find for you, for any donor, which is the most efficient charity in a particular disease condition or charitable area. So you can get around it, many, many ways, and it becomes an excuse that doesn't really hold water if someone's prepared to do a little bit of effort.
And then finally on that, I've certainly been involved in charities where people have given money, and great philanthropists have given money with conditions. And there's always a bit of a challenge there for the charity who has a charter, who is setting out to do something fairly specific generally. And then the philanthropist giving money but saying, but I actually want to make sure it happens in Western Australia or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's wrong. I think you pick a charity that's delivering a service in an area, geographic, and in a need area that you agree with, and you're prepared to fund them. Now, you may offer to try and help them a bit, but you don't have the right to direct them. If you want to direct them, set up your own charity to do that. I think the sort of directed philanthropy where the money's highly conditional on how the charity uses the money isn't very helpful, because in reality, the charity probably knows more about how best to use the money and where best to deploy it than you do. So if you want to do it West Australia, then find a West Australian charity, right? Or do your own. Don't use this as a power mechanism to get people who are desperate for your support to do what you want them to do.
Daniel, thanks for talking to Fear and Greed.
Pleasure, Sean. Take care.
That was Daniel Petre AO, philanthropist and founder of Airtree Ventures. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join me every morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast with all the business news you need to know. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.